Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees, here are today's top stories. Football fans in the northeast celebrate as a Saudi Arabia-led consortium buys Newcastle United. The Magpies are said to become one of the richest clubs in the world. But human rights groups warn of sports washing. A new study diagnoses organ damage from long COVID by comparing the MRI scan results of patients to those of a healthy person. And new car sales have dropped due to a lack of semiconductors. That's despite demand for electric vehicles shooting up amid recent fuel shortages. A Saudi Arabia-led consortium is buying Premier League club Newcastle United for over £300 million. The deal will make the Magpies one of the richest clubs in the world. But human rights groups are warning that Riyadh is trying to rebrand itself through sports washing. We hear more from NTD's Joanne Robson.
Delirious football fans celebrated outside St James's Park on Thursday. This after Newcastle United's sale to a Saudi Arabia-led consortium went through. The long-running takeover saga brought an end to owner Mike Ashley's deeply unpopular reign. Charlotte Robson from the Newcastle United Supporters Trust says fans are ready for a change.
There's been no investment, and then past that, our football's been terrible. The ambition has just been pummeled out of our club, and our fans are just so excited that this sort of is a new dawn and hopefully a new era for Newcastle United.
The club was relegated twice during Ashley's 14 years in charge. The Saudi deal is worth over £300 million, and Newcastle will become one of the world's richest clubs. But with new owners comes a new set of concerns for the club's supporters. Human rights groups accuse Saudi Arabia of sports washing, using sport to distract from its human rights record.
Just like Formula One, elite boxing, golf or tennis, association with a top-tier football team is an incredibly attractive means of rebranding a country with a tarnished reputation. And the Premier League need to better understand the dynamics of sports washing and tighten up its ownership rules.
Saudi Arabia was widely condemned in 2018 when a journalist was murdered at its Istanbul consulate. It also faces criticism over its treatment of women. Jakins says Amnesty International knows the importance of the deal for fans.
But we would just say to them, look, find out who these owners are, understand what's going in Saudi Arabia, and be prepared to be, the good activist fans that we know that you can be, and raise these concerns kind of loudly and vocally.
A recent poll by Newcastle United Supporters Trust shows almost 94% of members were in favour of the takeover. Robson says human rights issues are for the Premier League to worry about, rather than the fans.
I think it's vastly unfair to put that on your average football fan who just wants their club to do really well. If this money's being allowed to come into the Premier League, that's the Premier League's issue.
Saudi Arabia has increasingly sought high-profile sports assets, venturing into Formula One racing and heavyweight boxing. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Google is to demonetize content that contradicts what they call the well-established scientific consensus on climate change. This comes a week after Google-owned YouTube says it will ban all harmful vaccine content. It's raising concerns the firm is escalating censorship of dissenting views. NTD's Jane Worrell has this report.
Tech giant Google says it will no longer run any ads alongside content that contradicts the scientific consensus around the existence and causes of climate change. The decision will also impact publishers and advertisers on Google-owned YouTube. In a statement, the tech giant said, "This includes content referring to climate change as a hoax or a scam, claims denying that long-term trends show the global climate is warming, and claims denying that greenhouse gas emissions or human activity contribute to climate change." It's raising concerns that the line between politics and science is being blurred. We spoke to Harry Wilkinson of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. What are your thoughts on that new policy?
Well, we all want to see accurate information about climate change. I think the concern here is that actually who gets to decide what counts as accurate information? Do we trust governments to do that, and do we trust corporations to do that? And I would have serious concerns about actually whether this can be possibly policed in an effective way. I think you also have to look at why climate change has been singled out, and surely that has to do with a sort of global political movement to achieve net zero emissions and to limit opposition to that. Now, why do I say that? I think we've experienced at the Global Warming Policy Foundation a bit of that censorship that we're worried maybe Google will implement now with its new policy. For example, we had a report by Dr. Indor Gokhlani. He was one of the former reviewers to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And his report was entitled Climate Change Impacts and Reality. So he was looking at the trends and viewing them in the context of human progress, which has seen far fewer people actually die from extreme weather events, and actually different trends for different types of extreme weather. Yes, some types of extreme weather are getting worse, but others, he noted, weren't actually seeing those same increases. And yet that report was chosen by Facebook in this case, and it was given a false information label.
Google's new policy announcement comes ahead of the UN Climate Summit, or COP26, which will be held in Scotland next month. The UK government has pledged to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which could be very costly to the economy and the individual. Jane Werrell, NTD News.
A UK study uses multiple organ MRI scans to diagnose the internal damage done by long COVID. By comparing the scan results of patients to those of a healthy person, researchers can identify which organs are impaired and send the patient to the right specialist. NTD's Eddie Aiken has more on this.
Gerda Bayliss is a long COVID patient. She was infected with the virus in the first wave of the pandemic. Over a year later, she still has pain and difficulty breathing.
I get like sharp pains and radiating pains on this side and all down my shoulder. Sometimes I lose sensation in, especially my left arm. I get pains in my arm, and I especially if I kind of walk for a bit longer than normal, it'll go cold and it'll go numb.
Bayliss is part of a trial called CoverScan by a medical innovations company based in Oxford. Researchers use multiple organ MRI scans to identify how the virus does long-term damage to internal organs.
The two sort of main features that we're looking at quantifying are the amount of fat inside the organ and the amount of inflammation inside the organ. So we now have a good understanding of what numerical value would represent healthy versus unhealthy, and then we could hopefully then direct the individual patient to the right specialist based on what we see on the images.
Research during the trial shows 70% of patients had an impairment to at least one organ. A third had damage to at least two organs, and heart damage was found in 17%.
And we cannot know with absolute certainty for an individual. However, amongst a group of 30 to 50-year-old, otherwise healthy individuals, it is very, very unlikely that 17% of them would have measurements consistent with cardiac inflammation. Therefore, the odds are clearly in favour of COVID causing injury.
CoverScan is being trialled in the NHS as a diagnostic tool. Banerjee is hopeful it can be used to target patients for the most effective treatment. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
New car sales have seen a heavy fall due to shortages of semiconductors. Though in the wake of the recent fuel crisis, demand for electric vehicles has shot up. NTD's Malcolm Hudson takes a look.
Commercial Director of MG Motor, Guy Pigounakis, gave us his insights about the situation faced by the industry. He said that at the start of the pandemic, nobody knew what was happening, with many dealerships closing down.
Since then, it's moved into the consequences of the pandemic, if that makes sense. And one of those is a global shortage of semiconductors, which has had a major impact on the supply of new vehicles. In recent months, I'd say as great as the pandemic itself at its height.
He said that this severe shortage of new cars has had a knock-on effect of driving up the value of high-quality, relatively low-mileage used cars.
We have new cars in short supply, despite a very significant demand from the public for them, and used cars selling for quite literally record prices, often very close to the price of a new car.
While the market for new cars as a whole has suffered recently, the demand for electric cars has dramatically increased. The recent fuel shortages have sparked a sudden refocus of customers' attentions.
So we've seen hits on our website for electric vehicles increase by over 300% in the last 10 days. It's a staggering increase. This year, to the end of September, the industry for battery electric vehicles is 88% up. There's been 125,000 electric cars sold this year at the end of September, by the end of September, not in September, against just over 66,000 last year. So you can see the market's absolutely on fire.
Staying with car industry news, makers of high-performance electric cars have long been looking for ways to develop lighter, more powerful batteries. This prompted an Oxford-based company to work on motors that are lightweight and more efficient. Here's NTD's Eddie Aitken with more.
Speed has always been paramount for supercar makers, and now they are in the race of their lives to electrify the highest performance vehicles before climate policy cuts their combustion engines. That's why Ferrari and Mercedes-Benz are turning to startups such as Oxford-based electric motor company YASA for expertise in technology.
So what YASA's technology enables is for vehicle manufacturers to get a longer driving range. So you can drive your car further on a single battery charge with our motor, about 10% further than you could with a conventional motor that's in all other vehicles today.
Batteries are immensely heavy and electric motors overheat if driven too hard. These are big problems for a niche industry that charges hundreds of thousands for lightweight cars capable of screaming round a track. Today's battery technology cannot compete with the sustained power of a petrol engine, so YASA are rethinking everything from electric motors to car body materials.
So typically, almost all electric cars that are on the market today use a type of electric motor called a radial motor that is sausage-shaped, and actually it is bigger. It's about 3 times the size of YASA's technology and 3 times the weight of our technology as well, and also has about a 10% less efficiency from that motor.
YASA already makes motors for Ferrari, Swedish supercar maker Koenigsegg, and an unnamed British supercar company. At a small facility in Oxford, it also tests motors for AMG, the high-performance subsidiary of Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, so I think at this point in time, with Ferrari, we've reached a certain level that is probably two to three times better than the competition, and we still have a long way to go in our technology roadmap, not just with the motors, but also with the power electronics that we can integrate in them.
Makers of high-end electric cars keep racing to develop lighter, more powerful batteries. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
And Daniel Craig may be saying goodbye to James Bond, but his iconic Aston Martin is about to be given a new lease of life. British company Lunas modified the new DB6 to be all electric.
You've got the aesthetic beauty which you will never get in a modern vehicle, yet the aesthetics can now be combined with modern powertrain.
Bond actually drove a DB5, which features in the latest movie No Time to Die. But the DB6 is regarded by many as the epitome of British motoring, since it was unveiled in 1965. Each electrified Aston Martin DB6 will undergo restoration that Lunas calls remanufacturing. Technological upgrades include the latest brakes, suspension and steering, along with air conditioning and electronic infotainment systems. It has a range of 255 miles. Still to come, two journalists from the Philippines and Russia win this year's Nobel Peace Prize. They are recognized for their courage to fight for freedom of expression in their countries despite challenging conditions. That and more after the break. This year's Nobel Peace Prize is awarded to two journalists for their courage to defend freedom of expression. In their home countries of the Philippines and Russia, they face threats, arrest, and even murder. NTD's Joanne Robson has more on this.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee awards this year's Nobel Peace Prize to two journalists, Maria Ressa from the Philippines and Dmitry Muratov from Russia.
Ms. Ressa and Mr. Muratov are receiving the Peace Prize for their courageous fight for freedom of expression in the Philippines and in Russia. At the same time, they are representatives of all journalists who stand up for this ideal in a world in which democracy and freedom of the press face increasingly adverse conditions.
Maria Ressa co-founded Rappler, a news website criticising President Duterte's controversial anti-drug campaign. The committee says she documents how social media is being used to spread fake news, harass opponents and manipulate public discourse. Ressa says journalism has never been as important as it is today.
Rappler lives with the possibility of a shutdown on a daily basis. You know, we're on quicksand, and yet at the same time, if you keep the North Star ahead of you, you protect the facts. You hold power to account.
Dmitry Muratov co-founded newspaper Novaya Gazeta and has been editor-in-chief for 24 years. The committee says he defended freedom of speech in Russia for decades, under increasingly challenging conditions. Muratov talks of colleague Anna Politkovskaya, one of 6 Novaya Gazeta journalists who have been killed.
For 15 years they could not solve the murder. It probably means that they know but don't want to tell. This is how the impunity has affected our guild.
Reza and Muratov were chosen out of over 300 candidates. The two winners will share £840,000. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Now to Poland. The country's highest court rules that parts of EU law are incompatible with the Polish constitution, widening an already sizable rift between Brussels and Warsaw. The move draws condemnation from EU members, with Luxembourg saying the Polish government is playing with fire. Lucy Fielder reports.
A Polish court has ruled some parts of European Union treaties are incompatible with the Polish constitution, challenging a pillar of European integration and sharply escalating a dispute between Brussels and Warsaw. Poland's Law and Justice Party government is embroiled in a battle of values with Brussels over issues such as judicial independence, media freedom and LGBT rights. The party says it has no plans for a so-called Polexit. But critics say that by challenging the supremacy of EU law over national law, the government jeopardises Poland's long-term future in the bloc and even the stability of the European Union itself. Pro-EU protesters shouted shame and traitor at the Deputy Foreign Minister on Thursday night after the verdict was announced. The constitution won, Paweł Jablonski told reporters. Poland's Prime Minister welcomed the ruling on Facebook on Friday. It was Mateusz Morawiecki who'd requested Poland's constitutional tribunal to rule on whether EU law takes precedent over the Polish constitution. The European Commission said it was concerned and emphasised that the primacy of EU law was at the core of the Union. Anger from EU members came thick and fast, with France's European Affairs Minister, Clément Beaune, calling it an attack on the Union, and Luxembourg saying Poland was playing with fire.
In other news, a senior French senator today called Taiwan a country. He is on a visit to the island with a French delegation. China is condemning the trip and his comments. NTD's Joanne Robson has more on this.
A delegation of French senators during a visit to Taiwan praised its economic development and democratic model. Head of French Senate's Taiwan Friendship Group and former Defence Minister Alain Richard said they sought to intensify France's relationship with Taiwan while calling it a country.
So we have so many spaces of cooperation and of exchanges, and I insist especially on the economic ground, because this country is a big power economically, and we appreciate so much its dynamism.
China has condemned the trip and his comments. Beijing views the island as one of its provinces and not a country. China also opposes any international engagement with the island that suggests a separate status. Richard said France seeks a greater role in the security of the Indo-Pacific region.
So in this approach to Indo-Pacific security, we want to be a contributor, and we want to be helpful to maintain stability, open communications, free navigation.
Another senator in the delegation criticised authoritarian regimes that undermine democratic models.
And Taiwan is the counterexample. Taiwan is developing. Thanks to democracy, it develops very fast. They are the counter-demonstration.
The day before, the delegation met with President Tsai Ing-wen, promising to support Taiwan's efforts to join international bodies, such as the WHO. The visit comes at a time of growing international concern over rising tension between Taiwan and China, after almost 150 Chinese aircraft flew into the former's air defence zone over a 4-day period since last Friday. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Staying with France, a group of French senators are sounding the alarm about Beijing's influence on college campuses. They are explaining some of the techniques the Chinese regime uses to infiltrate colleges in France. NTD's France correspondent David Vivez has the details.
A group of French senators concluded in a report on Wednesday that the Chinese regime has a strategy to systematically influence college campuses in France and other countries. In other words, Beijing tries to pressure universities in a way that it becomes impossible for them to challenge the CCP's influence, programs or narratives.
The CCP is the most serious threat in terms of influence. It uses illegal methods. One of them has led to college professors censoring themselves.
The report came out after the senators did extensive personal research. They had 30 meetings and interviews with college instructors, ambassadors from different countries, and with representatives of French ministries. One of the CCP's methods is to pressure colleges to self-censor.
When there are partnerships involved, college professors start to self-censor under the pressure of their colleagues or the university.
The senators also investigated Confucius Institutes. They say Confucius Institutes are gateways that allow the CCP to enter Western universities and gain more power over a university's program or research. Several French and European colleges have either closed their Confucius Institutes or contained their influence. But Senator André Gatolin says there are new threats.
Confucius Institutes are in a weak position. What is happening, though, and it is even more serious, is that the CCP is trying to convince researchers to work for them, giving them salaries without telling their universities.
The senators also mentioned Beijing's partnerships with private business schools.
Some business school presidents told us that Confucius Institutes want to develop more business programs inside the universities, so that they can establish themselves in the local economy.
Doing business through college partnerships opens up more than one gateway for the CCP.
Confucius Institutes were at the beginning only for students or senior citizens wanting to learn Chinese. Now they try to develop economic programs and have a more business-oriented objective that sometimes goes with the New Belt and Road Initiative. Now there are even institutes of the New Belt and Road.
The Senate report says the Chinese regime has a long-term objective to systematically influence foreign universities, and this is especially true for private universities and business schools rather than public universities. And they say this problem is more serious in the United States and the UK rather than in France. David Vives, NTD News.
And now to Spain. For almost 3 weeks, a volcano on the Canary island of La Palma has been blasting out red-hot lava and black smoke. The lava flows have forced the evacuation of more than 6,000 people and destroyed over 600 houses. New drone footage shows a lava flow that got separated from the main one, which has already reached the Atlantic Ocean. The second flow is engulfing greenhouses and plantations and is expected to reach the sea too. Spain's air traffic operator on Thursday closed La Palma's airport because of ash accumulations. And ash clouds on Friday have started to disrupt air traffic on the neighboring island of Tenerife. Scientists say the eruption remains unpredictable. And in other news, Andy Murray is back in the good books after being reunited with his wedding ring. The tennis legend made an announcement on social media today.
Would you believe it? Oh, they still absolutely stink, but the shoes are back, the wedding ring is back, and I'm back in the good books. Let's go!
Murray had left his wedding ring tied to his shoes before leaving them under his car to air out overnight. He thanked his fans and social media followers for their help in sharing the message widely. Three-time Grand Slam champion Murray was set today to face France's Adrian Manarino in the first round of the Indian Wells tournament in Southern California. That's the news for today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.